Welcome to this webinar, B2B Growth Marketing, Hacking Your Way to Predictability. My name is Liam, Campaign Marketing Manager here at Cognism, and I'll be moderating this session. Our aim for this session is to share practical advice, real-world examples, and key lessons in driving predictable demand. We'd like to keep the session interactive, so do please submit your questions throughout. It's worth making the point that we're currently living through an unprecedented global health and economic crisis. Marketers may find themselves under increased scrutiny as budgets are squeezed and some businesses risk collapse. So it's more important than ever to get the marketing basics right and to continue to think innovatively to find the best way to get the most for the least. Joining me today, I have Charlie Taylor, EMEA Marketing Manager at G2.
Hello.
Carla Rivershaw, Head of Marketing at Turtle.
Hi, everybody.
And Alice DeCourcy, Head of Marketing here at Cognism.
Hi, everyone.
Charlie, Carla, and Alice will share their unique experiences of driving predictable demand with plenty of takeaway lessons too. So before we get started, here's a summary of the agenda. We'll start by covering channel testing and optimization before moving on to content plans, minimal viable product marketing, so how to get that low-hanging fruit, team structures and roles, sales alignment, and then finishing with some campaign top tips and a tech stack example. So moving on to channel testing and optimization. How do you know what channels work best for you, and how do you go about finding that out? Before testing anything, you should always define what you want to achieve. On screen here are some of the benchmarks I know we use here at Cognism. Alice, so how do you let the results you want to achieve inform what you're going to test?
Thanks, Liam. Yeah, I think this is a really interesting point. So we can all test things out, but it's kind of hard to understand sometimes where do you start with that testing. And the way I approach it is, say I've been given a task so right now it's quite an interesting one. My Chief Revenue Officer came to me and said, we actually want to increase spend in marketing, but we want to get the quickest results for that spend. So that is a very clear, defined objective. So then what I will think about is, okay, how can I do that and what channels would enable me to do that best? So that will help me narrow down the places that I want to start testing. And then within that, I'll set myself benchmarks and remits. So I will look at what I believe to be a palatable cost per acquisition for the company and the business. Again, what will be a palatable cost per lead for us? What our SQO to close one conversion rates are, and I'll look at historical data too. And then on that, I'll try and build out a picture. And I'll look at some of the tests that we've performed before, the channels that are working for us now, and that will help me decide how I'm going to narrow down the places that I want to put that spend and start testing. So in this instance, we've decided that the quickest wins are direct demo requests as opposed to content downloads, and that's probably quite clear. They are a bit more expensive, but we've looked at our retargeting campaigns on LinkedIn ads and found a few areas of testing that we haven't yet done. So we're going to be running some sprints in the next couple of weeks with clearly defined, which we'll come on to, a clearly defined objective and hypothesis testing method where we will increase that spend. It's important to say we're not just suddenly going to plug in 10x more money. We're going to do it gradually, because I think it's an interesting point and one that's really important to make, and you have to push back sometimes on your senior management when they say, oh, okay, so actually this last month you produced this many leads, this many SQAs, this much revenue. If I give you double the money, you can just double it. But it doesn't grow in that way. And so it's important to explain that clearly. And testing, I find, is a great way of showing that as well, and using data to back those decisions.
Great.
Thanks,
Great. So moving on to testing then. There are loads of different ways to structure your tests, and on screen is a Trello board laying out different paid ad sprints that we've run. Alice, can you explain how you structured these sprints?
Yeah, exactly. So this is kind of what I was talking about earlier. So the way that we do this is we have a Trello board. It's visible to everyone in the business. We share it with everyone, and everyone can come in and have a look. And within each of these cards, so actually, Leah, I think if you click to the next slide, that would be, yeah. We will create a hypothesis testing model for every single test that we run. So here on the screen, there's a couple of examples. So one was for a Google Ads campaign. It was for a new ad group around sales automation keywords. And then on the left-hand side, it was for a competitive Google Ads ad group that we wanted to run, where we were building a bespoke landing page, targeting specific competitors. And here you can see how we've defined the hypothesis that we want to achieve, the design of the campaign, and then the duration. They're really quick and short. We'll run them in 1 or 2 week sprints, and the budget. You don't have to have a massive budget to run these campaigns, all these tests. I think that's really important to state. I think sometimes we get caught up on statistical significance, but when you're in a growth marketing role or you're in a startup and you don't have big budgets, don't let that put you off testing. Definitely some data is better than no data, and it's better to make decisions based on some form of analysis that you're able to run. So that's how we lay out our tests, and these slides will be circulated after the webinar, so you'll be able to have a detailed look at that as well. And yeah, I just find this process works really well. And then in the Trello, people can click into them, see the tests that are running, and then you can see the results that are within the comments on this Trello card. And then any commentary that I have running with the campaign exec who will be executing this as well.
Yeah, it's definitely a great way to stretch the test, and it also just enables you to be able to look back exactly what you've done and see exactly what you did last time before you test something new. So I definitely think this is a great way to do it. Charlie, how have you structured tests in the past? Is this something similar to how you've done it, or have you done it slightly differently?
Well, firstly, I just want to say thanks to Alice for sharing these afterwards, because I'm definitely going to borrow this idea, because I think the way that you guys are doing it at Cognism is really great. It's definitely a little bit more advanced than where we are at G2 at the moment, but I think we use a similar kind of process to the Trello boards. We all live in Asana for our project management, and what we've done is we do a monthly brainstorm with the team where everyone comes to that having submitted ideas already for tests that they want to run throughout the month. So that can be something that they might want to test themselves, but it might be something that actually other members of the team can test as well. And I think that's really helped to get everyone in the mindset of we need to be constantly testing things. So I think, yeah, we're a little bit earlier on in that journey of testing. So yeah, I'm excited to borrow that template.
Great, thanks. So I think the moral of the story is that testing gets you results. Alice, I know on screen is a great example how testing has enabled us to make the best of LinkedIn ads. Is this something you could explain further?
Yeah, sure. So similar to what we just showed before in the Trello, where we were testing all these different ad groups for Google Ads, we do the exact same thing for LinkedIn. So where we have a content piece that we want to promote, we will test multiple different iterations of not only the creative, but the ad headline, the ad copy, and we'll try and stumble across the gold dust ad, which is going to get us, I guess the things that you want to look for is a low cost per lead. That's ideal. Loads of social proof and engagement, because then what happens is LinkedIn absolutely loves that, and your algorithm skyrockets and your cost per lead shrinks even more. And it's definitely something you have to work at. This didn't happen like overnight, but this particular ad ended up being showcased by LinkedIn on their roadshow, and I actually sent 2 of our campaign execs to the roadshow. We didn't know that it was in their deck as sort of like the best in class ad, and they were sitting there and they were like, that's our ad. So that was amazing, and it was really good to see that actually a small company who are kind of in scale up mode can kind of achieve those results. You don't have to be a big organization with big budgets where you're outsourcing all of this. I think the message here is just, by running these structured tests, you can get to this result. So what works in this ad, which we found, was the fact that addressing the audience, that's a really key piece of advice I'd give you for all of your LinkedIn ads. Call them out, that really works. A controversial statement, so the comments on this, some are quite cutting and some are quite interesting, but people are having a big debate. And so it was a controversial statement that's led to a lot of engagement, and that social proof has equaled reach for us and a really low cost per lead. So that's something else you can try if you feel comfortable. And short copy is also key, so under 150 words. You don't want to have them read more. The other thing I would say is you'll see that we do use emojis as well. We try to make our ads quite human. You don't really, it depends what kind of what your brand guidelines are, but for us, we find that works really well.
Yeah, I think it's funny as well to mention that LinkedIn told us that what people or a picture of someone looking at the call to action also often increases conversion rates, which we did by accident in this advert, but it's another one to know. It's a bit of an odd one. Charlie, do you have an example of how testing has benefited any of your campaigns?
Yeah, so I think it's actually something that we rolled out at the beginning of the year, was just, again, going back to that mindset shift. I think testing is really scary for a lot of people, because testing a lot of the time means that you failed at something. In order to kind of get that golden nugget, you have to go wrong quite a few times. So one of the things that we actually did at the start of the year, I learned from an article that I read about the founder of Spanx. And she basically said that her father, when she was a child, used to say 7 words to her every week. It was, "What did you fail at today?" And every time she would tell him, he would give her a high five. And he would celebrate the fact that she failed something. He wasn't looking for what she did really well today. He always wanted to know what she'd failed at. So I think sort of the learning for G2 was, at the beginning of the year, we started asking our team every week, as well as saying, you know, what was one innovation that you rolled out this week? We also started asking them, what did you fail at this week? And obviously both of those answers were really, really helpful for us as a business. We knew what we were doing well, but we also knew areas where we needed to make improvements. And I think sharing those tests for us has led to lots more of those successes coming through.
Yeah, I think that's right. Testing can sometimes just highlight where you've oh, sorry about background noise. Yeah, testing can sometimes just highlight where you might have gone wrong, and people can be so into an idea that you don't always want to know where it's gone wrong. So it's definitely like a mindset shift as well. Carla, have you learned from what have you learned from testing at Turtle?
Sure. I mean, I definitely want to echo what Charlie just mentioned there about how vital failure is actually to what you're doing. And so we will typically run ads, whether it's through LinkedIn or through other channels, and particularly through LinkedIn, which, you know, is, I guess, my preferred channel because of how targeted you can be in terms of the audience segmentation. We will review the ads that we're running on a very regular basis. So normally every week, we will take a look at what we've been doing, whether the messaging is the right messaging, whether we should be changing the call to action, and you know, whether we should be adapting the targeting as well. And this just helps us to be able to really make sure we are driving the highest number of clicks, the best cost per click as well. So you know, I just think that this has to be something that marketers are doing if you're using these channels. Again, to echo what Charlie mentioned, definitely don't do it in as structured a way as you guys at Cognizant do, and I think it's really fantastic, and I will definitely be stealing some of that for us as well. But yeah, we certainly do test all of the advertising that we do in some capacity to make sure that it's as optimal as possible.
Awesome, thank you for that.
I think we've got a question relating to this, so shall I just answer that quickly?
Yeah, go ahead.
So the question is, how many iterations did Cognizant go through to get to the LinkedIn ad that worked? So that is a really good question. And so how we will work mainly with LinkedIn is, and actually this is also a really key tactic that I would recommend that you use. So LinkedIn is very good at optimizing for the best ad itself. So what I would always suggest you do is you create an ad audience group, so your target audience, in a campaign, and then you create the ad variations, so the copy, the headline, and whatever else you want to test, but you test one at a time. So you need to have one data point to measure against each time. Otherwise, you don't know what worked and what didn't work. But then within that campaign, LinkedIn will start serving the best ad more and more and more, and it will optimize for you. So it does a lot of the work. So actually, it only took us a month to get to this ad. And that's one thing that LinkedIn is really good at, and it kind of takes quite a lot of that testing work away, unlike Google Ads, where you'll find you have to do a lot of that manually yourself. Thanks.
Awesome. So moving on to content plans, getting to page 1 of Google. Committing to a huge content project can be hard to justify. It's a long-term investment and it can be hard to find the time, but the rewards can be absolutely massive. Carla, as head of marketing for a content tool, content is very much your speciality. What are your top tips for finding success within this channel?
I mean, I think when it comes to content, it's really important to keep in mind what success looks like for you. And certainly, you know, at Turtle, we are really interested in whether people actually read your content or not. And that is something which many marketers really don't know or understand, particularly where marketers are using platforms or formats such as the PDF to publish their content in. Yes, they can measure how many people have downloaded that piece of content, but that doesn't necessarily tell you whether or not that person has read your content or not. And actually, that's kind of important, you know, particularly when it comes to follow up with the people who have supposedly engaged with that piece of content. You kind of want to know whether they actually read it, and if they read it, for how long. You know, which parts did they read, which parts didn't they read? And so these are the kinds of things that at Turtle we are really, really interested in. And we use that to not only decide how we engage next with the people who've been reading that content, but also like it helps us to identify what the next piece of content is that we should be delivering up. I think when it comes to working on something like a big project like the one that you're talking about on this slide here, before you embark on such a big project like that, it's first of all obviously really important to know what people are interested in reading. And I think it might be quite difficult to do something like this without having some of that information beforehand. And so one of the things that we like to do at Turtle, and you know, I strongly advocate that people do more of, is using things like your blog platforms as a way to be able to test different topics and understand which kind of topics resonate most with your audiences. And then once you find the ones that people are actually interested in reading, that's the ones that you should be pursuing to do larger pieces of content with. I think that we have existed for a very long time prior to, you know, digital, in a world where we just didn't have a lot of this insight available to us. And so we kind of operated where we were, I don't know, producing brochures or whatever to get them printed, and then you'd print them and people would read them, but you really had no idea whether or not people actually read those pieces of content because they were printed. And now that we have digital available to us, there's no reason to operate in a world like that anymore. And we should be making the most of what technology is able to provide us. So we really need to start listening to what our audiences are telling us through their reading behavior, and then drive decisions off the back of that.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. There's no point creating content that just it doesn't resonate with your audience. The more information we can get about what they're interested in, the better. Charlie, I know at G2 you have some very effective content marketing strategies. Could you give us an overview of these?
Yeah, sure. So I think we're fortunate at G2 to have a very big content team. I think there's sort of 30 plus people within that team now. You know, content is a really big part of our product offering. So, you know, it's really important for us to have lots of people on the ground to support with that. That team sort of split out into two. We really have sort of community and content, and then we have SEO. So I think there's a few different things that team does really well. One is more on this sort of marketplace side, so our review site. We work really, really closely with our SEO teams and our product and engineering teams to make sure they have really strong alignment, and anything that they are building, you know, is ticking that SEO box. So I think that's quite a big piece. But then also we have a site called our Learn Hub, which is full of content to help people who are looking for new tech and looking for new software to buy. So that has about 1.5 million views a month. So, you know, a lot of traffic coming through there. I think some of the strategies that work really well for that site are things like we have a really big guest blogger network. So we really want to make sure that we're creating expert content always, but we have a little framework we've put together where people can contribute and join that, and we ask for different topics each month. It could be anything from we'd love a full blog, or we're looking for quotes or comments on a particular piece that we're writing. So we have a number of people who subscribe to that and contribute to that quite often. We also do a lot of community outreach, so working with the content teams on backlinks and things like that. So I think, yeah, those are some things that obviously take a while to sort of start getting traction, but some things that they don't cost anything and you can get started with straight away.
Yeah, and even though those things may have taken a while to get to, I think it really shows where you can get to. Like 1.5 million views a month is incredible, and that sort of traffic is exactly what a great content strategy can bring in. Alice, we've recently released our most recent big rock piece of content at Cognizant. Can you explain the steps taken when planning it?
Yeah, sure. So this is the 40,000 word piece of content that we're talking about in this slide. And so this actually all started 6 months ago when well, more than 6 months ago now, actually, gosh, back in the beginning of H2 of last year, when I first joined Cognizant. And so how I went about planning this was that I did a whole piece on keyword research. I wanted to find the most high value intent keyword phrase that we would want to go after that also had search volume. And then I built a content plan for the rest of that year around this phrase. So the phrase for us was B2B lead generation. This ticked the box of volume, and it also ticked the box of intent and relativity to our offering. But at the same time, we knew it was something that our ICP would be reading about and wanting to learn more, and it covered both sales and marketing. So it ticked a lot of the boxes that we needed. So then I set out the high level content plan, and essentially I broke it down into 5 different pillars that would sit beneath this top level topic. So we had outbound, ABM, technology, data, and lead generation. And we had the commercial objection at the top, which I think is actually really important when talking about content, because when you justify content, especially in a scale up or a startup, at the end of the day, it's got to be brought back to revenue. I couldn't go to my CRO and say, look, we spent 6 months writing this 40,000 word piece of content, but can't tell you how much revenue it's brought in. I just know it's great, and like we've got traffic and we've had downloads, etc. So must remember to plan back up to that key point. That's a really important piece of information. So then it was six month project, but it was broken up into small pieces of content. These were a mixture of blogs, guides, infographics, get some gated pieces, some not. Don't be afraid to give value up front. Like, we were working towards a massive piece of gated content, but we wanted to deliver value as we went. And just as Carla was saying, wanted to test the content. So every time we put out a blog underneath one of these topics, we were seeing how people were engaging with it, and whether it was something that was being read. Did we need to iterate? Should we try and get a guest contributor in? So we were always iterating, trying to create the best content. And then at the end of the 6 months, we had all of these content pieces, whether they were gated, ungated, blog posts, infographics. And it was our content writer, amazing content writer, Joe's job to put it all together into one massive ebook, which is the ultimate guide to B2B lead generation, but then 5 smaller books as well, each under these pillar topics. And the overall aim was that we would get, within the first month, we'd get to 1,000 downloads, and that would lead to, and then where we get a content download, we convert at 10% from a lead to an SQO, and then an SQO for us is a 25% conversion into close won revenue. So we worked out our commercial target based on that as well, and that was for month 1. And we're actually at, I just did the sum today, 480 downloads in 2 weeks, so we're on track for that 1,000, which is great to see. And then on top of that, there's obviously the SEO piece. So I think if Liam, you can jump to the next slide. I know we're going to talk about this now as well, so this was the next step to that whole content project, was that there was an overall SEO goal as well, which is going to give us long-term value and a lot more traffic, to relevant traffic to our site, which is obviously something we want to achieve alongside all of those leads that are then going to sales, that are going to turn into revenue. So this was all around building the pillar page around B2B lead generation. And I think, Liam, you're going to ask me about my top tips for that page. I've written them down on this slide here for everyone to read. But this is what we will be creating. It'll be this month, and we'll release it on the blog. And that's really where we're going to get from. We've got from page, I think we were on page like 7 to page 2 of Google, and this will get us to page 1 by doing this and sunsetting a lot of the content within the book as well. So I won't go through it all, but just some key things. Embed YouTube videos. Look up schemas. If you don't know what a schema is, there's a lot of great blogs out there. Make sure if you're doing a pillar page that they have a schema markup. You need to make sure that your URL title, answer a question. It needs to be 2,000 words or more, and actually using anchor links within the page. Google really, really likes that as well. Thanks, Liam. And actually, yeah, well, I can talk to this as well quickly, but this is the chart that I was referring to in terms of where we've seen our growth against that keyword term. So it does work. And one thing I'd say is we didn't just write 40,000 words. We started with blogs, just like Carla was saying, and we found those topics and those pieces of content that really resonated. So in the end, we've been able to create the most valuable asset, which not only do we get good leads from, but we're also getting the SEO reward as well.
Awesome. Charlie or Carla, did you have anything else you wanted to add on this?
I mean, I think Alice has been very thorough with this. She's done a really excellent job. The only thing I would say is that, you know, if you haven't done it already, I would highly recommend that you take the time to do some SEO keyword research, and just to really understand what your audience are searching for and just build content around that. We did that about a year ago, and we're basically still working our way through that list of keywords at the moment, generating content along those. So if you don't really know where to start, it's worth doing, and you can either do it yourself, and there is lots of great information online as to how to do that, or indeed you can hire somebody to do it, and it doesn't cost the world to do a project like this. But I think it's a really, really useful starting point if you really have no idea where to start. So
Great. We've just got a few questions in here, and actually on that, one of the questions was, what are your top tips for improving SEO?
Who would you like to take that, Liam?
I was just opening up the house, but if you want to go, Alice.
Charlie, do you want to? Because I feel like I've done a lot of talking.
Yeah, sure. So I think one thing I would say is, I think so many search results on Google now are review sites, and obviously I would say that with G2 being one of them. But I think a really easy way to kind of help you boost your rankings is to claim a page on one of these sites or more, because, you know, often they're very high up. So I think that would be my very quick tip for you. It's free, and you can do it within 5 minutes.
Great, thank you, Charlie. And Alice, I've got one that's specifically relating to what you're talking about. Is a pillar page the same as a landing page for a campaign?
No, actually, this is a really important point. So whereas a landing page for a campaign might sit on a subdomain, so say if you're using like HubSpot or Pardot or another automation tool to host your campaign landing pages, so your SEO juice would get wasted if it was sitting there. So you want your pillar page to sit as close to your main domain as possible. So often a hack is to put it within your blog. That actually will keep it close to your main domain if you can't have it sitting on the actual main domain. And it's not something that you're going to promote. It's not something that's part of a campaign specifically. It's for Google. It's purely there for Google. You're creating this, and it will then be searchable. People will come across it. They'll find really helpful information, which will push them out to other parts of your site, other pieces of content within your site. But it's not a campaign page, and just keep it as close to your main domain as possible.
Great, thank you for answering that, Alice. So on to our next slide, which is MVP and low-hanging fruit. In a startup and scale-up marketing, you don't always have the resources to run huge campaigns. Therefore, it's really important to maximize everything you've got. Sometimes these can be really simple things that you can take advantage of, but can deliver brilliant results. Carla, can you give some examples how you've maximized resources you have to get those quick and easy wins?
I mean, I think one really good example that I have of what we've done when it comes to kind of launching something really quick without necessarily having everything in place yet, it was around a campaign that we launched recently called Turtle Academy. And basically it's a course for marketers that are interested in learning about best practices when it comes to content creation, content writing, content strategy. And it's basically like a 30-day course where every day, 30 days, you receive another email with really useful tips and tricks to help you to get the most out of the content that you're creating. And, you know, writing the content for 30 different emails is quite a lot of work. And we had obviously no idea whether or not this is something people would find interesting or not. So what we decided to do was, rather than creating all of this stuff, is just to create, say, the first 5 emails, and that would cover 1 week's worth of content we would be sending out to people. And then we would just see what happens. And if people start signing up to it, then that's great. That gives us validation that we're doing the right thing. And then we can start to generate, say, the next week's worth of content. And I think this is like a really important practice to apply as marketers, because I mean, prior to joining Turtle, I used to work for a large corporate. And the typical mentality working in big businesses is that you kind of have to get everything done, everything ready, everything lined up before you launch. And before you know it, you spent loads and loads of time, loads and loads of money producing all of this stuff, and you still have no idea if it's even going to work. So before putting all of that time and energy into it, just test things. See whether or not it's actually going to resonate with your audience before you then put more work behind it and more money behind it to generate the next piece of content. So that would probably be my top tip for this.
Thanks, Carla. Charlie, same question to you. What tactics have you used to get the most for as little as possible?
Yeah, so actually something quite similar to what Carla's done. So we had to think about who within our staff network was connected to the people who we wanted to download content. So, you know, Adam Goyat, who's VP of Demand Gen at G2, has a huge network, mainly of marketers, posts a lot on LinkedIn, gets a lot of engagement. So what we've started doing is anytime we want to launch something, be it a piece of content or we have an idea for a piece of content, we get him to share it with his network first rather than on the G2 channel. You know, we still use that channel, but we don't rely on it as the sort of the sole channel. So we did a playbook for, you know, new LinkedIn tactics and new Facebook tactics. And he said, you know, who would be interested in hearing about this? And, you know, it was probably one of his most engaged with posts. We hadn't actually created the playbook at the time, but because there was that demand there and we realized actually this was something that was really interesting to people, we then went and created that. So I would have a think about, you know, one, who within your network can you get to push out content, but then, you know, as Carla said, like what can you test the water with before you put in a ton of legwork first.
Great, thank you. And Alice, can you share some of the tactics you have used that have taken advantage of those low-hanging fruit?
Yeah, definitely. I just want to touch on what Charlie was saying, actually, because I think it's a really interesting point. Using your internal champions, so the people within your company who've got these big networks and personal brands, is just such a great tactic to use. And you can gamify it as well. So like jokingly, we'll probably promote something on like our head of sales and our chief revenue officer's LinkedIn's, and they'll kind of compete to see who's had the most downloads, because we'll use new tracking links, and so we can track it right back. And that's quite nice, and it just like creates a bit of interest as well. But the one thing I would say, there's a couple of things that we've done. So one thing would be, if you're thinking about creating any gated piece of content, but especially if it's a big piece of gated content, think about creating the landing page for that piece of content first, and promoting it as early bird access and see how many signups you get. Set yourself a limit, like a litmus test limit, where you will invest the time in actually creating that piece of content. But just test it first before you go about, similar to what Carla and Charlie are saying, investing all that time and resource into that piece of content before you know. So that would be one thing. And the other thing that's really quite easy is look at all of your campaign flows, all of your content flows, and make sure you're maximizing the journeys for your leads. So one easy win would be, if you're using LinkedIn and you're using lead gen forms on LinkedIn, make sure the thank you page directs people back to your site so that they then become part of your retargeting traffic. You could just lose all of that traffic otherwise. That's like a really small low-hanging fruit, which is super easy to do. And then you can create bespoke campaigns off the back of that. And on your thank you pages on downloading content, make sure you supply another piece of relevant content. HubSpot do this really, really well. Just go to their blog, start engaging with their content, and you'll find yourself down this rabbit hole, and you'll be like 5 or 6 different blogs in, and you'll be like, oh my God, where did I start? Like, I don't even know anymore. But actually it's all been really valuable, and you've read loads of, you've engaged, you've been on the site for ages, and you've had loads of value. So just think about how you can create that lead journey as well with whether it be thank you pages, the thank you emails, all of the flows that you have for your campaigns. I think there's also a question here, Liam, should I take that one quickly? Which is about limited paid media budget. So when you have a limited paid media budget, have you found LinkedIn ads as a better ROI than Google display ads? So for us, I'm going to caveat this by saying it's very dependent on your company, what you're offering, and how you set up your ads, obviously, as well. But for us, yes. So we will get a cost per lead on LinkedIn. So for the month of March, it's $20. On Google ads for the month of March, it is $180. So there's a big difference, but the intent is higher on Google. That's the other thing I'd say. But on LinkedIn, you can target your audience better. On Google, you can make your ads as targeted as possible, and you can be bidding on the most targeted keywords. But at the end of the day, you can't control that traffic and who is seeing those. So I like LinkedIn because I can control the audience much better. And also in terms of how LinkedIn's set up to optimize, I find it works far more effectively. With Google, and our paid ads specialist, August, would probably attest to this, you have to put in so much work. Like, we'll set something live for 2 weeks and we'll be getting like a cost per lead of $150, and we think we've won, you know, we've beaten Google, but no. Then like week 3, we'll be like, oh my gosh, it's $380, and then we've got to rework all the landing pages, come up with some new ad groups, tweak, maybe go into manual bidding mode. So there's just a lot more to Google in general. So yeah, that would be my take. I don't know if Carla and Charlie, you want to jump in on that as well.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely agree. I would pick LinkedIn over Google ads for sure. In fact, we've recently switched off most of our Google advertising, and the only thing that we're keeping right now is retargeting, because that's obviously critical. I think that you do have that retargeting for reasons that Alice has already mentioned, but you can just get so much more granular in terms of who you are targeting on LinkedIn, and it is just such a competitive place with Google. If there are certain keywords, it just costs an absolute fortune if you want to be competing for them. So I think it's definitely more cost efficient using LinkedIn.
Yeah, and we're the same. We're the same as Title.
Great, thank you, guys. So moving on to our next topic, team structures and roles. It can be difficult to know how to best structure your team, and in order to get the marketing engine really going, you really want to find that optimal way to structure it. Alice, how have Cognism structured the team to set us up for the best possible results, and how has this evolved?
Yeah, so it's definitely interesting. This was the team structure when I joined Cognism. It was and if we move on to the next slide, sorry, Liam, then we have the structure that we have at the moment. So beyond just expanding the team, there's been like some very critical changes that we've made. And part of these came from finding the channels that worked for us, and part of them came in a shift of strategy. But sorry, and if we go on to the next slide, I'll just highlight the key things that made me refocus that team structure. So one thing that I introduced that I found we kind of had an issue is we had lots of specialized roles, not really enough people who were what I would call like a generalist marketer. and able to really execute a campaign end to end. So that was something that I really wanted to change and shift. And what we were finding was we were releasing a piece of content that we've worked on really, really hard, but no one owned campaigning that content or putting it into a bigger picture plan. And it just wasn't getting out to the world. So that was one big change that was implemented. So we introduced these campaign focused roles, and we reduced the specialization in the niches. So people who are coming into these roles are very 360. They've got a lot of experience across the full marketing mix. One thing that we've done as well is we've created a pure paid role. I know a lot of companies will kind of decide about whether they want to outsource that to an agency or indeed have it sitting in-house. And I think my kind of recommendation would be, if you've got the right person, try and keep it in-house, but obviously it's not always possible. But we actually happen to have an amazing resource there, and we just realized, it's kind of touching on what I was mentioning earlier with the Google ads, that it's a full-time job. If you want to keep those channels optimized and working and testing things as well, that's a full-time job. He has more work than he can even manage as well. So it really was important for us to make that a specialized role. And then we created this, which I'll come on to a bit later, but a hybrid role between sales and marketing called a marketing development rep. So these are people who are responsible for all marketing generated demand, whether that be content, downloads, or direct demo requests. Again, we found we had an issue where there was no clear responsibility for following up on the marketing generated leads, and it was sort of distributed across the whole SDR team, and it was very hard to get that feedback loop working. But by creating this specialist role, we've got this amazing feedback loop, huge buy-in from the sales team as well. They're part of our campaigns from the very beginning, and it's just given us, skyrocketed our conversions. They've gone from 3% to 10%, which is like amazing. Also gives us a predictable channel now, so we know if we increase spend, we can deliver more leads, and then that's what the number of opportunities we'll create based on that. The other thing is that we doubled down on content. That was something, that a channel that worked for us, and we limited the scale of enablement roles. Yeah, I think that kind of covers the changes that we made to the structure.
Great, and I think there's just a question there on that. What kinds of specialist roles did we used to have, just to get a better understanding of the change we went through?
Sure, and actually this is something I'm covering on a webinar with Carla. Is it on Thursday, Carla, that we're doing this? But we had an event and PR specialist roles, and events was very much a key part of our strategy before me joining the company, and what we found was that there was a great feel-good factor around events. But when we dug into the data, the CPAs were really, really high. The time and opportunity cost around a sponsored event was really high. And we actually found that there were other channels that we could scale more effectively for our business. That was just for us. And so that was one of the roles that we just couldn't justify anymore, having a pure events role, given that we were going to scale back events a lot going into this year, and PR as well. So PR, I know Carla, you might have some interesting insight on this as well, but something I still struggle with, to be honest. I haven't found an answer to it. Charlie would be interested to know as well if you have. But we've used agencies for this, and we had in-house, but I don't think any of those have really worked for us and given us the bang for your buck that you would really want. Beyond like funding announcements, nothing really we found any traction with. The one angle that we're now taking, and we've kind of folded it back into the campaigns team, is personal brands. So we'll take our top 3 internal champions, so our head of sales, head of the SDR team, outbound, and our chief revenue officer, and create personal brands for them, which then we use as channels in themselves. And that has actually worked for us. But it doesn't need to be a specialist role. So that was another specialist role that we had. And I think that covers, we had a website role. So that was a web developer. But again, there wasn't really that need. When you have 360 come into the team, they can manage and handle the updating of the website, the creating of the landing pages themselves. And it just gives you much more variety in terms of what you're able to do.
Great, thanks, Alice. Charlie, G2 are a much larger team than Cognism and across multiple regions. Can you explain a little more how that works?
Yeah, sure. So we have a slightly different setup. We actually have quite a lot of specialist roles at G2, but I can certainly see the benefits of having those end-to-end campaign managers, because I think sometimes you can get that piece where teams do end up working in silos, and you have to work really, really hard at that cross-team alignment. But our teams are structured in kind of 3 different groups. So we have brand and buzz, who basically are our creative team, almost an in-house agency. So within that, we have a copywriter, a web developer, a designer, and then the person who looks after that team. And then we also have an amazing product marketing team. So I'd say they're really, really pivotal to the success of G2. They're doing almost a launch every single week. Really great asset. And then we have our content and SEO team, which we've spoken about, and then demand gen. So we have within that international marketing, we have a growth team. We also have paid media within that team as well. So I think we haven't changed huge amounts since I joined the company. I think that team was already quite established, but I would say actually there are some similarities to you, Alice, in that we also found we had dedicated events resource in-house before, and what we found was, again, it was just so expensive. We weren't getting bang for our buck at all on the event side, so we definitely really scaled back on that piece. And also PR, we did have that in-house. I would say, yeah, we've had some similar sort of challenges in that it can be quite difficult to get traction. One strategy that I found that worked really well at my previous company was we would publish research maybe once a quarter, where we would go out, we would do a survey, and we would kind of do it 2 sides. So I used to work in employee engagement, HR, so we would survey employees and employers and almost kind of play their views against each other. And that always worked really, really well. We'd always get a lot of pickup from that. So I'd say, if you have your own data, amazing. Think about ways that you can kind of drill into that and use that. But if you need to go out to market, then you can do a survey. They're not the cheapest, but I think that's a really good way of using an agency or using in-house resource to be able to go out and get some good hits.
Great, thanks, Charlie. And I think it shows sometimes, like with the smaller team, maybe you need a team of generalists, and then actually as you get bigger, you need those specialists and to work more collaboratively, a much bigger team with more defined. I've got one more question actually. I think in relation to guys, which is what does the MDR role actually involve?
Sure, can you guys hear me okay? I just had a bit of a breakup of sound. Okay, great. So the MDR role, amazing. The MDR role is sales. It actually sits in our outbound sales team, and it's part of that structure, but it's a step up from just pure outbound. So the role involves them following up on any direct demo requests that we have. That's for them to action appropriately and book them in for the demo requests and take those calls and to qualify them appropriately. And then the other part of their role, which is what they spend most of their time doing, is they're following up on content leads. So where the campaigns team are producing, whether they're more nurtured leads or less nurtured leads from content, we will be producing those, and then we hand them over to the MDRs at an agreed point of handoff. And sometimes that is after a lot more touch points with marketing, and sometimes after that's after fewer touch points with marketing. It depends on the campaign. It depends on what we've defined with that team they're happy to take on and what their capacity looks like. But yeah, they will essentially be calling up those contacts, and in the first instance, they're actually trying to find feedback for us on the content. Was it useful? What do they want to hear more about? And if appropriate, they will be booking them in for demonstrations of our products where that fits into their strategy and challenges that they're facing.
Great, thanks, Alice. So moving on to the next slide on sales alignment. Now, the success of any marketing strategy is only as good as your alignment with sales. Chucking leads over the wall will only get you so far. To get the most out of the leads you're generating, sales and marketing need to be totally aligned. Alice, Are sales and marketing aligned at Cognism, and what have you found successful?
Thanks, Liam. I won't touch on the MDR role anymore because I think I've covered that to death probably. But one massive thing, and it's a really small thing that you can do, is we call ourselves a revenue team. So we're not sales and marketing, we're just a joined up revenue team, which makes sense, especially if you have a chief revenue officer as well who leads you. And another key factor is we measure the marketing team in the same way as we measure the sales team. So success for us is based on new business revenue every month, and we are responsible for generating 50% of that revenue, and the outbound team are responsible for generating 50% of that revenue as well. We use different methods and different strategies, but at the end of the day, I'm measured the same, my team's measured the same as the sales team, and that actually I find in itself drives alignment, because there's an joint understanding there that you're taking on a challenge and you're all driving the business forward in the same way. We have roles that work closely across the team, so that's the MDR role I was talking about. This is quite an interesting one, and I posted about this recently on LinkedIn, but we walk a day in each other's shoes. So by that, I mean every quarter we'll do a cold calling day, and as a marketing team, we will cold call for the day as well. So we will understand what it's like to be a salesperson doing that role, and it's I can tell you from last time when I did it, it's really hard, and it just gives you so much more perspective, respect, understanding for what they do. And equally, the MDRs will be fully onboarded into the campaigns that we're running, the processes that we have, they'll get training. So we find that really helps for both teams to align us together. I think also look at it as like an internal comms campaign. To bring marketing aligned with sales, you almost have to treat it as a campaign in itself. You need to over communicate the things that your team's doing. Nothing is ever you should never take anything for granted that the sales will know that you're doing this unless you've told them, and probably told them on a couple of different channels as well. Because again, similar to when you're going out to prospects, they don't all respond to Slack. They might prefer email or face-to-face, which is obviously harder to do at the moment, but get on a video call. Just explore the ways that you find communicating with sales that work, and get a couple of advocates as well within the teams. That's really helpful too. And just remove any unnecessary barriers that there might be, whether it be that when they're onboarding new starters, there wasn't ever a marketing session, just get a marketing session booked in as part of that process. And celebrate their wins as well as your wins. So joint celebration is really key. And yeah, incentivize in the same way. So that's quite an interesting one. And I know, Charlie, we kind of spoke about this as well a bit before, but it can be difficult sometimes to create the same incentives that sales teams have, but get a bit creative with how you incentivize marketing. If you're driving the revenue, then you can incentivize in similar ways too.
And Carla, same question to you. How are sales and marketing aligned at Turtle, and what have you found successful?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of the things that Alice mentioned really resonate with me. I think, first and foremost, the most important thing, in my opinion, is just communication. And you cannot, to Alice's point, over communicate with sales. Because even if you feel like you've said it 10 times and you've used all the different channels available to you, you will still have people who say, oh, I didn't know about that. So you really do just have to get very creative in terms of, the different ways in which you put that message out there. And you do have to be really patient with them, because in the end of the day, they are busy people who are basically focused on one thing and one thing only, which is closing deals. And so anything else is kind of viewed as a distraction to them. So just making their lives as easy as possible, I think, is really, really key. And that can come in the form of so many different things. So whether it's wanting to get their engagement with a campaign that you're running, if you want them to adopt a piece of technology, it's really important that you make sure it is as simple as possible for them. And ideally, if there is a new tool you want them to start using, find a way where it's sort of kind of integrated into what they're already doing. So if you can automate things, get it so that they're sent like automated emails rather than them having to log into a separate tool to do something, you will find that they get a lot more engaged with what you're doing, because if they have to do something that's different from what their day-to-day normally looks like, you can guarantee they probably won't actually do it. I think Alice's point around having shared targets is really important. And I think we're getting there at Turtle with that. So we use like a reverse waterfall to figure out what the targets should be for the business. So we know we need to generate this much revenue. We therefore know that we close this many deals out of, like this is the percentage of deals we close for every open deal. So therefore we need this many deals. We need this many meetings to be set up in order to achieve that number of deals. We need to have this many leads in order to achieve that number of meetings. And so from there, we can start to work out, okay, this is the number of MQLs that marketing needs to generate. And so therefore, in that way, we do have certain shared targets. But I think it could be better, and it is something that we're constantly working to improve. I think the other thing is just, making sure that you are, again, to Alice's point, sort of walking a little bit in their shoes. Now, I don't think I am brave enough to do what you guys do at Cognism, where you are cold calling people. Maybe I should try it at some point, because it does sort of sound amazing, but it also sounds terrifying. But I do think it's really important to join as many of the meetings that they're doing as possible. So you're getting in front of the customer, you're hearing the same things, and you can kind of walk away from that with a shared experience and a better understanding of what salespeople need to go through, and make sure you're adapting what you're doing to meet the needs of the salesperson. So those are probably some of the main things that we're doing at Turtle to help bridge that gap.
Thank you for that, Carla. Charlie, does anything differ at G2, and what has worked for you?
Yeah, I love all of those ideas. I also don't think I'm brave enough to cold call, but I think one of the things that we do here is maybe a little step away from that, but along the same lines is, joining sales calls. So either, listening in on the background or actively kind of participating in that call. We sell to marketers, so being able to have another marketer on the line can be quite helpful. In answering some questions and helping you to understand another marketer's world. We found that useful, and that's definitely helped to kind of build that bond with sales. I think, yeah, definitely speaking the same language, speaking, the language of revenue is really helpful. And then, we do the same as Turtle, in that we do that sort of, the backwards waterfall, and helping people to understand, we haven't just plucked this lead number out of anywhere. We've started with your target and we've worked backwards. I think that's helpful. And then just, ongoing metrics. It's amazing. I've worked at so many different companies where the sales leaders will have one set of reports and the marketing leaders will have another. And actually, having a combined dashboard for demand gen, or, your sales and marketing or revenue dashboard is so helpful, because even if you both think you're speaking the same language, the amount of meetings I've gone into where both people think they have a completely different number, and it takes you half an hour to figure out how you got to that. So I think, yeah, sharing metrics and sharing those reports just makes everyone's lives a lot easier.
Thank you. We're actually a little bit short for time, so we do have some other questions in there, but we'll have to get to those at the end. So on to the next topic, campaign top tips. So we're going to go get the top tips from everyone. Charlie, should we start with you?
Sure. So I think we've covered a lot of my tips, but I think my one takeaway would be speak to other marketers. I think, there is no such thing as an original idea these days. So many things have been done, but there's loads of ways that you can adapt what you're doing and make it unique to your organization using inspiration from others. So I think, I had the pleasure of chatting with Alice, a few weeks ago for a couple of hours, got so much insight from that, got so many ideas just off the back of this call. So I think, expand your network, speak to as many people as you can, and it's amazing how much people are willing to share.
And Alice, what are your top tips?
I think mine too are going to be, don't ever be afraid to test. That's my biggest thing I would like you to get out of this. Take the deck today and the testing model that we have, and just give a test to go and see how you get on. And then the other thing would be, don't reinvent the wheel. So when you come to setting up a campaign, I think we can all get carried away sometimes and try and create this campaign that's going to blow everything out the water, but actually just start small, build on it, and step by step, and then you can iterate that way. So that would be probably my 2 top tips.
And Carla, what else would you add to that?
Yeah, I mean, I think around the testing point, a really useful tool to help with that is Google Optimize, particularly when it comes to your website and how you structure it and the call to actions you're using and the messaging you're using. It's really great, and it's something that we use at Turtle all the time. So we might have one message, we do kind of like an A/B test. So some people will land on our website and they'll see one message with a particular call to action, and then other people will see a different message with another call to action. And then we will run that test for, say, a week. We will measure to see how people are engaging with the different options, and then whichever one wins, we will use. And then perhaps we will do another A/B test using that one and a different message. And I think just making the most of technology that's available, and that's free as well. So like, you've got no reason not to use something like that as a way to just constantly teasing out the most out of everything that you're doing. And the other thing is similar to the reverse waterfall that we use for setting our targets. You can also do that for campaigns as well. So, and there's probably a lot of great resources online where you can download templates like this, where you can say, okay, so my target is to generate this many MQLs. In order to get this many MQLs, I'm going to need to have, you know, like, based on the fact that we will typically see sort of X% click-through rate, we're going to need to target this amount of audience, and we're therefore going to need this amount of budget. And I think if you can kind of work backwards, it just means that it's a more predictable model that you have in place, and you know, it's a lot more structured in that way. So yeah, those would probably be my 2 tips.
Super, thank you. So finally, technology for scale. So there's so much tech out there, but it's really difficult to decide what you need. Even once you've identified your need, it can be a minefield deciding what tech to purchase. So really quickly, Carla, what are your top 2 tech recommendations?
So 2 that we really like using at Turtle. One is Hotjar, which is great for your website and being able to basically, it does heat maps for your website, so you can see how people are engaging with it, you know, which parts of the website they're clicking, kind of just understanding what their journey is. And it does like these video recordings, so you can actually see a typical journey that somebody takes on your website, which is great if you're looking to find ways to optimize conversions on there. So that's a really cool tool. And the other one that we've recently started to use is called Albacross. And Albacross is essentially a tool which helps you to see which companies have visited your website. And how I have started using that is basically I have a list of accounts that my sales team are responsible for in HubSpot. And I've basically imported that list into Albacross so that every time one of those accounts comes to our website, the salesperson gets a notification so that they know that this particular company that perhaps they've been actively pursuing for a while has landed on their website. So it just helps them to know that what they're doing is actually working. So those would be my 2 favorites.
Great, thank you. And Charlie?
Well, it's a tough one, but I think I would say Asana for us is something that the whole marketing team lives on all day, every day. I think when you have a team as big as ours, or even when you have a small team, it's a really good habit to get into documenting what you're doing, what you're working on, because even if you know you're a team of 1, it's still great to be able to kind of have that visibility for people outside of marketing, such as sales or product marketing, or you know, anyone in the business, to be able to kind of see what you're doing, the results that you're achieving. And then I'd also say Drift. So we've been a Drift customer for a few years now. I've had a lot of success with the chatbots. We're actually just starting to roll out Drift video in our BDRs. So just this week, I think one of them said that they'd sent out 20 videos. They're getting about 50% response rate to those videos. So it's a nice way of, kind of just changing up your outreach. So yeah, I'd say those are my 2.
Thanks. And Alice, what are your top 2?
So my first one would be Zapier. I just love it. It's a free tool at the entry level, and it basically allows you to create workflows where you wouldn't be able to. So if you want to do like integrated campaigns from one piece of tech into another piece of tech, and you're not sure there's a native integration built, Zapier is absolutely amazing for this. So we use it as an example for LinkedIn lead gen forms to push them straight into Pardot, which then pushes them into Salesforce just by quickly setting up. And it's so simple and user friendly as that. So it means that you can still get the benefit of having LinkedIn lead gen forms without having the barrier of it them not being automatically inputted into your Pardot or Salesforce. So that would be my number one. And then my number two would actually be a tool called Mailtastic. So when you think about your marketing team, your CS team, and your sales team, they're sending out loads and loads of emails every day to external people. And you all have your email signatures, which is actually your own advertising platform. With Mailtastic, you can automate the email signature banners that you're creating and your teams are sending. And so you can actually almost create like mini ABM campaigns. You can use it as another channel for you. So even for this webinar, I think we've got about 10 signups just through our email signatures. So it's a great tool in that way as well.
Great, thank you. So I think that's all from us because we have slightly overrun and we're going to have to miss the questions. I can confirm though we'll be sending a recording and a copy of the slides to all of you after the webinar, and we'll try get those answers back to those questions that we've missed. But otherwise, thank you so much for attending today, and I hope you have an excellent day. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.